Welcome into the CHGO Blackhawks Podcast, powered by ComEd. It's getting easier for your business to switch to electric vehicles. Learn more at comed.com/clean. Hey everybody, it's Tuesday. We're in Studio B, formerly known as the Radish Garden, but
formerly did we change it?
I think we did. I don't. When you don't play, when you're not a 20-goal scorer, you lose the naming rights. Didn't we name it the Bedard, Studio Bedard?
Studio Bedard, that's
yes,
correct.
That's
I forgot about that.
Yeah, so you're right. Live from Studio Bedard. It's Greg Boyson. It's Mario Terabasi. Jay Zawoski is still wearing his Mickey Mouse ears down in Florida. Yeah. So we're joined by our pal, Joe Brand from WGN Radio, voice of the pregame, postgame, everything in between. You'll recognize his voice. I don't know if you recognize his face.
Well, it's great to be here.
Oh, man.
No, thank you. Thank you guys for having me, and thanks for Jay taking a vacation. Thanks for Nick Foligno not being available, and thanks to the What Chaos guys for only taking up one day during this week.
I mean, we so many friends, only so much time. But
yes. At least we didn't give you the Matt Damon treatment. You actually made the cut. And it's far less newsworthy than the last time here. I believe you were in when I was on vacation the day the Blackhawks announced that Eddie Olczyk was not returning. So
yeah, crazy timing.
Far less news going on. Who would have thought that in February or late January, almost February, far less to talk about than in mid-July or whatever that was.
Wasn't that Jay's MO when he was working at the Score and he'd have a show with one of the Blackhawks and like the next week the guy would get bounced?
He definitely had a bad
like a kiss of death to Jake McDowell and
I have the same effect when I buy a player's jersey.
True.
You can bet that like if a guy on the Blackhawks ever sees me with their name and number on the back, call your real estate agent because you're going to need to sell your house within 3 months. It's just the way it goes. So here we are, the All-Star break. I mean, I know there are a few teams playing this week. I mean, to those Blue Jacket Predator games, get you excited. I'm kind of tuning out of hockey for the week. But here we are leading up bye week, All-Star break. What has been your biggest, in takeaways from the first almost 50 games of the season?
Yesterday on Blackhawks Live, I was kind of separating the season with pros and cons, and I think obviously the biggest pro being Connor Bedard, and it almost seemed like the pros and the cons just kind of matched up evenly in terms of how many there were and the significance of both. Like, as great as Connor Bedard has been, and we kind of expected him to be, how detrimental has Lucas Reichel's year been? Is that at the same level? I don't think so, but it is disappointing, and it's almost as worth noting as how great Bedard has been. No one could have predicted Corey Perry and Taylor Hall not being as big of an impact for this year's team. I know two totally different circumstances, but like I kind of forget that Taylor Hall's on the team because he wasn't here last year, came in for a few games, and not only was he supposed to be a big part of the offense, but just supposed to be a huge part of Connor Bedard's development. And Bedard's clearly been doing fine without him.
Right.
But that's just a whole nother aspect. And I mean, Jason Dickinson, Peter Mrazek, probably in the same category. But with all the adversity the Hawks have had to face, it's kind of strange that now they're starting to play the style that we saw a lot more of last year. I know our post-game shows are a lot more similar than last year now, where, hey, good effort, came up just short. Not the worst thing in the world, but man, a win would have been nice here. So the most important thing I'm looking forward to after the All-Star break is how Bedard is incorporated back into that. I have a good feeling about all of it, but I know you guys were talking about it, how the team plays differently with Connor Bedard. Mm-hmm. So what's it look like when the core, the standard, the fundamentals are kind of where you want them to be, And now you get your best offensive player back. So even more of a reason to be excited for Bedard coming back.
Yeah, I think in that light, like the biggest like pitfall that this team could have is just going back to their old way of just like, oh, okay, Connor's here. Let's let him make things happen. It's just like, let him be like maybe the finisher that this team is obviously missing, having the least goals scored in the month of January.
And it's kind of tough too, because the Hawks were dealing with this when they had Patrick Kane, but Patrick Kane had been here forever. Mm-hmm. Like there was an effect of wanting to get the puck to Patrick Kane or thinking, okay, I got to set him up. Maybe that effect is going on with the Hawks, but it's still so new with Bedard and all the other new players too. Yeah. The one thing I really liked about last year was after this All-Star break, when they had all these types of games, they kind of found their identity. I mean, remember the Boston game. We remember the Pittsburgh game. So I am excited for hopefully that to be like last season and the second half be a little bit more enjoyable.
I hope so.
Yeah, I mean, we're all kind of hopeful. I know it's been asked of Luke, too, like, hey, are you guys going to play the same way when 98's back in the lineup? Yeah. And kind of not. There was a little bit of that, like, deferring to him, like, oh, don't worry, we got this Bedard kid. He'll go out and put up 2 or 3, and we'll be right back in this game. And without him, you're kind of seeing this, like, I mean, I know it's been bad, but like I saw, what was the stat that the team is shooting like 4.7% on the season or something? Like it's not from a lack of trying, right? It's just from a lack of finish, and like we saw it the last couple games, especially that Calgary game. It's like, can somebody finish, please? Yeah. But yeah, we're just hoping. Obviously, it's excited to have Bedard back, and it sounds like Tyler Johnson's going to be back relatively quick after the break. Maybe, Connor Murphy, I know he's not offensive, but, Beauvillier will be back at one point. I don't know about Andreas Athanasiou. That situation's been weird.
We do know that
he's alive.
He is alive.
He was. I did see him.
He was in the latest episode of Every Shift by the team.
Right.
Saw him in the corner of the locker room.
There's video evidence that he's still here. Was not abducted by aliens.
But yeah, I mean, we have no idea about his timeline.
But you're right about the Taylor Hall, though, because one of the last couple games, waiting to get in the room post game, he came out walking by, and I was like, "Oh yeah,
they got this guy.
That guy is here. I totally forgot. There's so much of that this season."
I think DJ from the What Chaos podcast, he posted a picture of the Bruins jerseys that they're wearing this season. They're like centennial jerseys, and it was a Hall 71. And it took me a second. I was like, "What's wrong with that?" Like, and I was like, "Oh yeah, he never wore that jersey." Like, yeah, hopefully, if you've seen his Instagram. He is already back rehabbing his ACL surgery, so hopefully, coming in next year, he's in an interesting situation coming in next year because we have no idea what he'll bring to the table. Didn't really get an idea of what he brought to the table being in Chicago, so and he's will be on an expiring deal next year, so that he's in a fascinating situation with his timeline, his health, what he can do, and where this team is going to be.
And I understand how it can be frustrating for fans right now, too, because there is so much talk about what hope we have for the future, things turning around. But it's been so tough to, really pinpoint what's going wrong with this team when there's been so many subtractions and there's been so much movement. Luckily, the main saving grace has been, hey, Connor Bedard is still fantastic. Like, he is what we all hoped he'd be and advertised for. But unfortunately, it just so quickly jumped back to the same type of thing of a solid fundamental style of hockey is the saving grace right now, which makes me excited to see what's going to happen when Bedard comes back and excited for next year too. I know that's not what fans want to hear right now, but this is what a rebuild is. This is the long haul of it, and this is just the harsh reality of it too.
Yeah, we get a lot of that in our post-game shows of,
oh, you too?
Yeah, it's probably the same people. Yeah. But just the frustration, they thought it was going to be better this year, but even at full health and everything going right, before the season started, we said if everything goes right, we get average NHL goaltending, which has been exceeded, and health, we thought, 70 points would be a realistic jump.
10-point increase.
Yeah, 10, 11 point. But obviously, when, you lose so many of your key forwards, it's just not going to happen. But we are seeing, the progression of an Alex Vlasic, the progression of a Kevin Korchinski, who, I think he just still needs to get that confidence to be a little more aggressive with the puck, shoot more. We're going to really see something special there. But outside of like that stuff, you mentioned you were talking pros and cons. What other pros have you seen now that we're on the positive side? Outside of Bedard and some of these young guys, is there something that's kind of like surprised you about how well it's gone this season?
Definitely Alex Vlasic's just giant leap, I would call it.
Any leap he takes is going to be giant.
Exactly. But that's part of it too, Greg, is like how big he is.
Yeah,
he's
impressive.
really playing into his body. He's learning how to play and use his body with his long reach. And also it kind of gives you more encouragement about where the Blackhawks front office minds are for these guys. Like that was a good. Well, Vlasic's a Bowman guy, right? Or sorry, he who must not be named. Still getting my bearings here.
It's all right. That's your free one.
Yeah.
But
everybody gets one.
Everybody gets one.
Put in the jar.
Yeah.
It's not just about Bedard with that young talent. And I've liked the strides that Isaac Phillips has made too. And there's so much more of that still possibly available. The Peter Mrazek thing is great too. I also just like how these short 2-year deals with Foligno, Dickinson, and Mrazek are, number one, they're rewarding these guys for playing the way that they want to play. And the Hawks are in this position right now because of how well they accumulated all the draft capital in the years past, mainly last year. It's cool to see this stage of the rebuild, where before it was, kind of clear house, pick up as much as you can, and now it's like, well, we still need some bridge guys. And I feel like those are the ideal guys you want in a dressing room to move on to the next wave of solid talent. The other thing is I think Hawks fans just need to understand and realize that every player, it's not going to be just linear improvement. And I mean, we're totally seeing that with Lucas Reichel right now. And not saying that it's going to come through for him, but sometimes it's not just you move from step 1 to step 2 to step 3. You're going to have to take some dips and some dives. And I kind of felt that way with Luke Richardson because I was so pleased with him last year that the beginning of this year was like, oh, what's going on? Like he was able to do it with a roster on paper that wasn't as good as this one. But now after having all these setbacks and kind of dwindling down to the bare bones of the roster, he has gotten back to that level. And a lot of guys mention how good his spirits are. And, he's such you guys know, he's so transparent and he's so just straight to the point. I think the players really appreciate that. We had Jacob Megnon after a post-game show, or on a post-game show after a win against the Islanders, I want to say. And he just mentioned how Luke does such a good job of getting those guys revved up, energized to play, because obviously losing so often can become very draining. But Troy brought it up before the Calgary game. You could just tell by the body language that the Flames and the Hawks were in two totally different environments. And you can look at the records. Calgary is doing better than the Hawks. But for Luke and this coaching staff to get that team ready to still play a game like that is still saying a lot about how he is as a coach. I'll never forget towards the end of last year when everyone was getting all ticked off about how well the Hawks were doing, ruining their chances of getting Connor Bedard. And someone said, Luke Richardson has this team too motivated to play.
Yeah.
Like that's a bad thing. I'm like, so whenever somebody comes up with Luke criticism or even Kyle Davidson criticism, I'm not ready to really start diagnosing their decision-making until they're given an even playing field. Yeah. And we see how a lot of these other guys who they put a lot of faith and value and responsibility in pan out. And so far, I think we've seen the right moves being made with those types of things.
Yeah, and there's not there's not expectations of winning or success or anything like that yet for these guys. And that's the kind of leash that they've been given is like, Davidson came in with his rebuilding plan and ownership is giving him the runway to kind of see it through. It's not something that's over in a year and a half. Like it's going to take a while. And when the Blackhawks were going through their coaching search, it was like, okay, what kind of coach are they going to look for? Are they looking for someone with, some cachet that's out there that has a long history? Are they looking for just a bridge guy? Are they just going to make Derek King the head coach and just say, hey, thanks for thanks for your time in 2-3 years. But they went with Richardson, who it was his first time getting a full-time head coaching job. And it's part of that plan of like, okay, let's let him grow as a coach as the team grows, and then have the faith that he'll get to that point that when the team's ready to contend, he's also that kind of coach that can get the most out of him. And I think having such a long career that he had, being a former player, playing from the 80s, 90s, 2000s, and in almost to the 2010s, he has seen so much hockey, and he has seen how the game has evolved that I think he really can connect to guys that have different mentalities in hockey. Like there's still modern day players that think the game and play the game with the mindset of 90s hockey, where it's a little bit different than the modern day thinker, but he can still connect. Like he can talk to a guy like Jared Tenorti and a guy like Lucas Reichel and be able to get the most out of both of them. So I think that is something that helps him and I think translates to the team, buying in. The buy-in last year was incredible. Given the circumstances this year, I think we're seeing that again now. Like you said, like since Bedard's been out, we're kind of seeing what last year's team kind of looked like as far as effort and structure and execution and everything. So yeah, I think it's just going to take some time with those guys. But we had a question yesterday as our Mailbag Monday segment. It was just like, when's Kyle Davidson going to get fired? It's like, what? like that's there. And I see sometimes on like, we'll get from our non-sponsored betting partners, we'll get emails randomly that'll be like, Blackhawks head coach Luke Richardson, third highest odds to be fired. Is he on the hot seat? It's like, what are you talking about? Like it's definitely interesting to see like how things have gone these first almost two full seasons under Davidson and Richardson, and where things are headed. I think the hope is very clearly within the prospect system, and luckily a lot of those guys are giving us things to be excited about. So that's where I think the hope lies.
And really quick, when you were talking about the hiring of Richardson, I've said in the past, when that Hawks job was open, that was the most unique head coaching job in all of the NHL at that time, because they're looking for a head coach that can lead a young core, and also looking for someone that can lead a successful hockey team in a couple of years. It's not a short-term hire, it's a long-term hire, but who is going to be the right person to see this through? And the resume you just gave about Richardson, I think, is what makes him such a good candidate, because he had played for so long. He had been in multiple different stages as a head coach, and he gets a rousing review from just about everyone. I mean, when I was talking with Anthony Beauvillier when he first came over to the Hawks, and I was like, could you see head coaching tendencies, when you were underneath him? And he's like, oh yeah, absolutely. Like right away, he's like, once I came here, I knew that was going to be one of the more exciting things about becoming a Chicago Blackhawk was to play under him.
Yeah, and I think his demeanor for this type of team is perfect. Never gets too high, never gets too low. When you're dealing with rosters that have young guys who are trying to get their footing, or guys that are like, hey, you're probably only here for a few months, so give it the
and
old
because he's
try.
lived that life,
right?
And it's whether it's him personally or just seeing that with teammates and friends throughout the league, like he gets it, he understands it.
Yeah, and I think that kind of demeanor helps this team as well, because you could be a yeller and a screamer, but after a while, we've seen it, that it eventually falls on deaf ears. And for the most part, after, in post-game interviews, Luke is pretty much the same guy. But every once in a while, it's happened a couple times this year, you hear the either disappointment or the anger in his voice every once in a while, and those stick out. So you have to imagine that's the same in the room. Where if all of a sudden he is angry about something, that's got to get your attention, because you're like, whoa, this is different. This isn't him being the positive, influence. This is him
stern dad
laying down
factor.
the law now, and it's. I think that's a good thing going forward, and as more these guys get more experience, and hopefully down the road some more veterans get added to the mix, I think it's a good recipe for success. I know we get a lot of people that still, he's not flawless. He has some of his in-game stuff, can be criticized, but overall the results, especially when you consider all of the injuries he's dealing with this season. I mean, the fact that he hasn't, just said, I can't do this anymore at this point.
He hasn't quit.
I mean, the wine and exercise is paying off.
Yeah.
What you bring up about him picking and choosing his times to kind of like let loose and I don't want to say lash out or anything like that. I'm sure that's what he respected when he was a player, and that's what was more productive in his eyes when he was a player. And I also understand fan bases. The Hawks fans just thinking like, okay, like this team is second to last, and yet we're all talking about the possible positives, but year 2 of a rebuild, this is kind of the mindset you have to have. And it's different because it's hockey, right? Like not too many teams do this whole rebuild thing like baseball does.
Right.
Like baseball, you're either fighting for a championship or you're rebuilding. There's a lot more middle ground in the NHL. And that's because Canadian teams want to be competitive as possible. They just want to get in and see what happens. So it's kind of interesting because it feels like in some aspect the Hawks are going a different route. But then I also just think there's 2 lenses on the Hawks. There's a lens on the Hawks through the NHL's eyes, and there's a lens on the Hawks through Chicago's eyes. Because as much hockey love and Blackhawks love as there is in this city, a lot of those fans are just Blackhawks fans. They're not NHL fans. So it's kind of interesting to see the contrast of that, like getting all the backlash for Luke and Kyle Davidson when like, okay, are you following along? And that's not to say, those people aren't following along, but it's different than other leagues. It really is.
Yeah, there's a mentality within the fan base that I can totally understand where it's just like, for a big portion of the Blackhawks fan base, they became fans in the last 10, 15 years when it was Taze and Kane and the whole dynasty era, 3 cups and everything. So when you pay attention to the Blackhawks, you're expecting success and star players, and you're not looking at a team that's 31st, 32nd in the league and people being like, well, yeah, that's okay. Like, I think, and it's totally fine. Like that's, be a fan how you want, but it'll make it a lot easier when you understand the bigger picture. And I think when you look at the NHL and how tanking is perceived, there's a lot of teams that with what the Blackhawks did, they said, look, we are going into a rebuild. This is going to be what it's going to be like. There are teams that do not admit that they're in rebuilds or do not admit that they need to rebuild. And then you have a situation like Columbus where it's just like, you have a lot of good young players, but then you also are holding on to Johnny Gaudreau, and your expectations are let's contend, and it's just like you don't have the pieces to do it, so everyone gets frustrated because you don't have the commitment to go young, invest in prospects, and build up with young assets because you're also trying to sell that you're actually going to do something in the standings, so that when you are sitting 30th. Everyone's upset and no one's happy, and you have one of your best defensive prospects saying, what's going on here? Why am I not playing? So I think the Blackhawks did a smart thing in being like, not trying to say, we might just move a few pieces here and then try and veil it. They were just like, we are going to get rid of everything that matters and start this whole thing over.
The last guy tried it that way.
And that's why why the new guy had to clean up all the mess.
Well, speaking of rebuilding, and if you're looking to rebuild your floors at home,
very nice.
You got to go with the team that's always at the top of the league when it comes to flooring, and those are our pals, Chicagoland legends, Empire Today. With Empire Today, you get shop at home convenience, the right product for your needs, quick and professional installation, and most importantly, a low price guarantee. Empire Today is the best place to get new flooring, so of course they have copycats. But Empire can't be beaten on quality, service, speed, so the competitors advertise low-quality products that Empire simply won't carry. Empire won't promise the lowest prices because anyone who does that is putting flooring in your home that they wouldn't put in theirs. One of the best parts about the Empire experience is their virtual floor designer. It's a great way to see how the new floors are going to look in any space. It's easy. Just snap a picture of the room you want to put new floors in and see how those floors are going to look in that room. They pride themselves on their convenient shop-at-home service. They help customers shop for the floors where they use their floors so they can see exactly what they're going to look like. That makes perfect sense to me. They also service their own warranties. So if there's ever an issue, just call Empire. They service all their warranties themselves, so you won't have to track down a manufacturer's phone number. Schedule a free in-home estimate today. All listeners can receive a $350 discount when they use the promo code CHGO. Restrictions apply. See empiretoday.com/CHGO for details.
How did they not make you guys sing the jingle like Nationwide does for the TV?
I mean,
we have
done it. It's not.
Can you do it now?
I think you should do
free.
it more.
I feel free. I mean,
You guys, not me.
800-588-2300. Empire.
There it is.
All right, good start, I guess.
We'll work on that.
If it's not in the copy, we don't read it. Hey, I saw that we had a $1.99. That's how you usually say it. From Charlie the Bacon Guy. Yeah, as you see, he says everybody gets one, Joe. So he's a little Charlie chip in. And yeah, Charlie the Bacon Guy, always in our chat, our favorite bacon provider and coffee mug provider for today's show. Bacon, by the way, makes a wonderful post-workout meal, especially when your workouts are at the Midtown Athletic Club. You can check out the Midtown Athletic Club at any of their 4 locations in Palatine, Bannockburn, Willowbrook, and right here in the city. That's the Midtown Athletic Club and Hotel located in the middle of Bucktown and Lincoln Park. Joe, have you been to the Midtown Athletic Club before?
No, but I've seen your guys' posts about it. It looks fantastic.
It is a fantastic place to get in a workout. So I will tell you that if you are anywhere near Palatine, Bannockburn, or Willowbrook, in the next day and a half, you can sign up and miss their initiation fees, because through the month of January at those 3 locations, Midtown is offering no initiation fees to new people who sign up. So you could do that and take advantage of all of their tremendous amenities, including luxurious locker rooms, wet and dry saunas, indoor and outdoor pools and hot tubs, state-of-the-art gym equipment, and then all of the group exercise you could ever ask for, high-intensity interval training, yoga, cycling, cross-training, boxing, you name it, they have the ability to provide it. And if you love tennis, the Midtown Athletic Club is the place to be. They have courts and programming that are the best in the sport. They have indoor and outdoor tennis courts for tennis, paddle tennis, and pickleball, and everything is professional quality all the way. So head on over to midtown.com/CHGO to schedule your tour and find out more about the Midtown Athletic Club nearest to you.
All right, we covered the what's already happened. We've beaten that horse to death over the past few weeks. So what are you looking forward to the most after the All-Star break? Except for like an entire month at home, which is nice. But what are you looking forward to? I think with like not guys really worrying about the trade deadline this year, unlike last year.
Not a lot.
I think that's going to make a big difference down this big homestand.
I just think the continuity, I mean, the fact of getting guys back and hopefully having them back. I mean, the main thing to look forward to is Connor Bedard returning. But again, what I was saying earlier, if they can maintain this style of play and incorporate these guys back the right way, just to make more fun, enjoyable games. We've had the Bedard mania, and we've had the team finding its footing, even though the 20-game losing streak on the road is part of it. They're quality games, they're quality competition, just not finding like you were mentioning before, the scoring touch to finish things off. But again, I look back at what happened last year and how the team just really kind of found their groove a lot more after the All-Star break. And that was without a lot of the guys. Mm-hmm. I mean, Kane being traded, Domi being traded, Lafferty, McCabe being gone, and Taves not being around for a while. They continued that high competitive style and spoiled a lot of games for some teams fighting for the playoffs towards the end of the year. So I am excited for that. And, maybe there is even more of a resurgence with guys like Foligno and Dickinson and Mrazek because they know they're sticking around. I'm going to keep my eye more on Philip Kurashev too. I've been impressed with how he's been able to grow and evolve, and maybe we'll see him playing more with Connor Bedard when he's back, and how is that going to work well for Kurashev again? Of course, we're going to be looking at Reichel. I don't know. I don't know what's going on there. I had such high hopes for him. I know you guys did too. But more importantly, because
Greg did.
Yeah. Just how well he looked in training camp and how much hard work he was putting in the off season. I mean, bulking up, working on face-offs. Like, it wasn't just going in with, hopefully some good luck here. Right. And we've seen the flashes, we've seen the glimpses. It just hasn't really taken over. But I don't know. Do we kind of use the Philip Kurashev comparison? Because it's kind of taken him a little bit to really find more of his consistent game. And we saw those flashes in the pan of how skilled he is. Is it just going to take another year of being a NHL regular for Reichel to find his fullest confidence of game moving forward? I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's completely fair. I think when Kurashev was coming up, a lot of the detriment to his development was like health. Like, he would have a good stretch of games, then he'd get hurt in Rockford, and then he'd be out for like 2 months, and then he'd come back and have a good stretch, and then he'd be hurt, or the season would end, or whatever. But yeah, with Reichel, it's just like it's not like he's snake bitten, because he's averaging just over like 1 shot per game, which for a guy with his skill, it's just like that's kind of not what you would have expected from him. And then as much as like Luke praises like his play off the puck, his play defensively, there's still like not many games where he has like high impacts, which we were all expecting. So if he comes back for next season, he's an RFA, if he's on like a 1-year deal, like that's definitely like, here is your timeline to prove that you're, not the player that you have been showing this season, but that you can be a little bit more, which Kurashev got a little bit more of that and I think it was because he had so much interrupted development over time. Whereas Reichel, I mean, he's been pretty healthy. Like he's been out there, other than the games that they have,
and given the opportunity.
Yeah. He's other than the games where he's been a healthy scratch, because I feel like Luke is trying to like send a message to him to say like, we need more out of you to be a regular. He's been around, so yeah, it'll be interesting to see how the final 32 games of the season go for Reichel's development, for what he does. I would love to see him go back to the guy that he was last year, at the end of last year, the kind of player that he was in Rockford, because that would give you some confidence, being like, okay, like maybe it was a slump to the start of the season, and he can finish strong, and then he gets maybe more of the Kurashev treatment this offseason, where it's just like, okay, maybe a 2-year contract extension, a little bit more runway. But it'll be interesting, however they feel like he fits into the future, because he still is a part of it. He kind of has to be. You don't just give up.
And he's still so young.
A first-round pick, yeah, that's 21 years old. But if it doesn't pan out, it kind of changes things a little bit.
Yeah, we saw a little flashes in the last game against Calgary. Had a couple
timing
of
is
those,
unfortunate.
Yeah, it's like great. Now you got 10 days to try and think about how to do that again. But at least it was a baby step, and then we need more of that. I know he's been a giant topic of discussion in our post-game shows this year, and people, send him down to Rockford. I don't know if that really accomplishes anything at this point. I think he got to the point where maybe he needs to play less hockey, not more hockey, and this break is a good thing for him. Get away, go someplace warm for a few days, come back recharged. But it's also way too early in the rebuild to start declaring 21-year-old kids. Like, if you're going to struggle, do it in a year where there's no expectations. Like, don't be like, if this was a year where it was like, we need Lucas Reichel to be 65 points to get us into the playoffs, and it's not happening, well, then okay. But this is a year to do it. And we've seen young players. We just talked about Kurashev. It took him a long time. A lot of that was, previous coaching staffs weren't really quite sure how to use him. He was top 6 one day, 4th line next, healthy scratch the next. Like, so getting that kind of consistency will help. I think that will help Reichel too. Once they can get him in a spot where he's going to stay because of how he's playing, that will help too. So
I think it's important too for fans to realize that as much as you're trying to fix Lucas Reichel and Arvid Soderblom for right now, you're also trying to make sure you're doing what's best for them in the long run. And as frustrated as fans are with those players and want to see them just move down immediately to, you're not playing hockey good enough, go down here until you do play hockey good enough, that affects guys' confidence and mentalities. And if it works, great. But what if it doesn't? And not saying that's what's holding back the Hawks from doing it, but I use this argument a lot, and maybe it's no longer the case because Sutter Bloom's last performance was not a great one. But after the St. Louis game, they didn't send him down immediately. If they did, I think everyone would have understood why, but they didn't. They go on a break. They kind of restructure the way they use Mrazek and Sutter Bloom. It works out better for both those guys. Mrazek rolls, does well. Sutter Bloom works on things, does better. Didn't go great the last time Sutter Bloom was in the net, but that's an example of how not just demoting a guy immediately can work out and hopefully work out well for them in the long run.
Yeah, there's still a lot of hockey left, and the Hawks are nowhere near contending. So patience.
Still 32 games to turn it around, though.
Exactly. He, you know,
Saying
as I
there's a
said,
chance.
he could still make me look like a genius. He's not that far behind the point lead. You know, he goes He goes on a 32 game point streak. I got a shot.
He might lead the team after all. Yeah, you're right.
We've had a lot of comments in the chat about how much everybody enjoys the radio broadcast. A lot of people still doing old school, putting the radio broadcast on TV. That was growing up in my house. That's what it was for Bears and Hawks games with my dad. But we're blessed as Hawks fans to have, you know, John and Troy at every game. They're so good. What is it like working with those guys? Because, you know, their off-air personalities are a little different than their on-air personalities. There's some good stories that cannot be told on air. Yeah. And then what's it like working with them? And what is it about those two guys that it works so well?
I've often thought about that a lot. Also growing up, listening to those guys. And you got to remember, this is my third year doing it, but this is really my first year only doing it with John and Troy. There was a lot of movement before, and, you know, for whatever reasons, but the consistency has really played such a role that I didn't realize how significant it was. Like, I knew how great of a guy Troy is and how good at his job is. But being able to, like, continue a conversation from something we talked about in Game 2 and bring it up in Game 35 is so valuable and so useful. And I just have such an admiration for how John works and does his job. And I was talking with someone else who's in the industry about it. He's like, the first time I listened to John, he's like, I'm not even that big of a hockey fan. But he's, like, singing. He's not just doing the game. He's singing. Yeah. And I think I told the story the last time I was here. The first game I ever covered, reporting for GN, John is standing and swaying and calling the game, and he's just, like, going with the flow of the game. And he's just so good at it. I mean, I used to produce the games, and I would chop up all the highlights, and I'd hear everyone around the league. And I'm like, yeah, John's top notch. Yeah. And to be able to work with those guys on a daily basis in that capacity and be a part of that team is just, I'm such a radio nerd. I grew up always listening to the radio. I remember one time leaving college where I'm like, someone asked if they could hitch a ride. I'm like, yeah, but we gotta go at this time because the Hawks are playing. Yeah. And they're like, okay. And we're in the car and we're listening to the game the entire time. And the guy's like, so when are the Hawks playing? Because he thought I wanted to get back in time to watch it. Oh, yeah. And I'm like, no, we're listening to the game on the way home. So it's to go from just being a fan of those guys to working with them in a small capacity to working with them in a bigger yet still small capacity. It really is a dream come true. And they're just the types of personality of people you want to work with. I mean, they take their jobs so seriously, but they never take themselves seriously. Yeah. And that allows me to screw around a lot because, let's face it, sometimes we are trying to make things enjoyable when the games aren't quite as much. Yeah. And Troy knows how to walk that fine line. John knows how to walk that fine line. And I mean, they're Pat and Ron-esque. You know, it's like people understand their humor together, their relationship together. And it's just like growing up with two friends and knowing their personalities. You feel a part of it even though you're really not. Yeah. And you feel like you're on in the inside jokes with them even though you're not. So it's really cool, and I'm really lucky, and there's not a day I take for granted about it.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead, man.
No, you're good.
I just saying, like, the biggest downside of this job is I can no longer listen to the radio broadcast. And they're just so good. You know, John paints a picture so well. I think a lot of people ask, well, why didn't John just move to TV after Pat Foley left? And I'm like, well, that's kind of a different ball game. Broadcasting hockey on TV where people could see.
It's a different flow. To
basically having to paint a picture for people's minds. He's so good at that. And Troy has this knack of taking hockey, which at times can be a very complicated game, and just making it sound so damn simple.
Yep.
Just most of his analysts is just as simple as like, you just got to do this and you'll be right where you want to be. It's like, why didn't they think of that?
Yeah. He's so smart, but he never makes you feel dumb. Yeah. And he just knows the right way to portray what he wants to see from the team. And he's been through it too. So he never like calls out a specific player for lack of effort unless it's warranted. But even then he goes about it the right way, the productive way. And I think that's why he does so well resonating with the current players, because he goes out of his way to chat with them, and he doesn't do it too much. He says he picks and chooses the times he talks with the players, because he knows what it's like to go through a grueling year and with struggles, and you don't want to get bugged by the broadcaster at that time, and he knows that. So yeah, again, they're just both so good at their jobs that they mesh together so well, and it's a very fluid thing, and it's a lot of fun, and I really enjoy being a part of it.
Now, peeling back the curtain with your process being, pre and post, intermissions, everything, how are you? Because I'll glance over and see, how you're working in the booth during games and stuff. How are you tracking the game, watching the game? I know you're in the booth with them, so you can probably just hear everything that they're saying to help. But you're also prepping stuff for intermissions. You're working with, interviews you've done, like audio files and getting scores and getting highlights and all that stuff. So what is like your kind of process here that maybe some people have no idea what goes into it and maybe think like, oh, he just turns on the mic and talks for 20 minutes?
Well, it's kind of funny because I feel like I am part of you guys on the beat, right? But I also feel like I'm part of John and Troy because I'm on the broadcast crew. And I feel like I'm kind of part of the team, but I am also very part of the radio station. Yeah. So it's a very unique job, but that's what I love about it, because I don't think of myself as just a podcaster or just a play-by-play guy or just a host or just a reporter. So I like doing all of those roles. With the pregame show, I try to, number one, just catch the fan base up with what is the most important thing to know right now. And I try to lead with that, and then I try to go down the line with everything else that is just a little bit less important. I like that timeliness of the job. I enjoy that. It keeps you current. It keeps you up to date. I'm trying to pull out things that I find interesting, which maybe sometimes I'm being biased with that, but I'm trying to entertain everyone.
Yeah.
I don't want to get too analytical, but I also don't want to screw around too much, because I know that comes off as faulty.
Right.
So I try to spread that out as evenly as I can. But first and foremost, I try to follow the flow of the game. If it's a great game, we're going to be talking about why it's a great game. And especially if it's a great game because of how the Hawks are performing. And everything else that falls in just hopefully falls in naturally. I just try to pick up on tendencies. Like there were times where I would fill in on color commentary because somebody's not available, and I'm happy to be that guy. Mm-hmm. I know I'm never going to be the next Troy Murray, Darren Pang, Eddie Olczyk, and that is fine, but I'm happy to serve that role for a game or two. Yeah. But I'm not going to break down a play. And this is why Lucas Reichel didn't do this. This is why Nick Foligno. I'm just going to say, well, Lucas Reichel has been doing that a lot more. Nick Foligno has been doing that a lot more. And I appreciate doing that role more, because I'm not going to try to mask myself as some type of expert in a way that I'm not. The day-to-day routine of my job, believe me, it's a blast. I see you guys at morning skate. I come back home. I prep for my pregame show as much as I can. I try to make sure I get to the United Center a couple hours before my show, just so I'm not worried about time whatsoever.
And to beat John to the soup.
Well, yeah. Talk about my entire life. It's either a 3-bowler or a 5-bowler, and that depends on how good the soup is that day. But yeah, and then I work as much as I can towards the pregame show, make sure that's all hashed out. And then again, I try not to put too much pressure on myself for what I'm going to talk about, because I just let the game dictate what I'm going to focus on. Intermission shows are structured on taking a look around the league, picking Troy's brain, and then getting set up for the next period. But even that's changed. I don't just read the scores anymore because to me that's a little monotone, and I think people get bored of that. So now I just pull out a talking point from each game. A certain player is playing in his 1,000th game. Oh, he's the first Danish person to do that. And then, oh, look, he scored a goal today. That's going to stick in a fan's brain more than, thank you. That's going to stick more than, this team is up 2-0.
Right.
So I try to do that with almost everything. If we're at a home game, first media timeout, I go downstairs. I got a cool little post-game room. There's a bathroom in there, so that's nice. It's honestly, I think they use the room for United Center entertainment. It's like kind of a dressing room, a staging room.
Yeah.
But we just got a table there with the game on TV and all the equipment fired up. The cool thing about it is after a win, we'll get a player because the player can make the short walk over.
Right there, yeah.
And we've got a reporter too. My guy Jack Heinrich will go get sound. He'll bring it right over. He'll send it to the station, chop it up. So it's all very quick and timely. But that's another thing. I got to choose a post-game guest, and I got to keep in mind who's probably talking with the media right after. Sure. That's why back in the heyday we didn't get a lot of Taves and Kane, because if they had a good game, they're talking to you guys. But now so you're strategic about that, figuring out who you want to choose. So there's just a lot of, and you guys know with live productions, there's just a lot of on your feet thinking, but that's what I like about it. And sometimes my post-game show is 20 minutes. Sometimes it's an hour and 20 minutes. It all depends on how quickly the game goes and what happens afterwards. And it's just, I enjoy the spontaneity of it. It's never the same thing, but it's often very similar. And I never want to get too much into a routine because I don't want to freak out if something goes wrong.
Yeah, it's always good, the live aspect, to kind of pivot and maybe talk about something that necessarily didn't happen in the game, but we've done that numerous post-game shows where it's like, okay, guess what? They didn't score again. So let's talk about something completely different.
Give the game some credence,
Right.
10 to 15 minutes, and then let's try and
Pay off our bits and then
be entertaining. Yeah.
and then talk about something that doesn't make us just want to pull our hair out of our heads. You know what won't make you want to pull the hair out of your head is that
transition like a pro.
Somebody's got to do it around there. Jay's gone. I got to pick up the slack. Our partner, Ray Chevrolet, is ringing in the new year with their best offers all month long. Make your way to Ray Chevrolet on Route 12 in Fox Lake, Mario's neck of the woods, to join in on the savings and start your Ray resolution. Or the resolution. As one of the top-selling Chevy dealers in the Midwest, you'll always be able to shop one of Chicagoland's largest Chevy inventories, but right now, they're trying to make room for the inbound 2024 models, so all their current inventory must go. Plus, you'll find the perfect tailgate vehicle at Ray Chevrolet because they have over 100 new Silverados available with prices starting at $19,495. That sounds like a good price. I'm no expert,
For a
but
Silverado?
that sounds good for a pickup truck. Or take up to $10,000 off a new 2023 Silverado. And on top of it all, they're pricing over 125 vehicles under $20,000. Seriously, guys, can pricing get more affordable? I don't think so. But what's more affordable than that is free. And right now, you can get a free oil change by mentioning CHGO when scheduling your oil change at Ray Chevrolet in Fox Lake. Start your new year off right. Visit Ray Chevrolet in person in Fox Lake or raychevrolet.com to start your Ray resolution. They've been serving the community since 1963. Find new roads.
And you know what? It is getting easier for businesses to switch to electric vehicles. I know Ray's got a lot of vehicles out there. I wonder if any of them are electric. It is something that we can all get behind for the health of the planet and for the well-being of those of us who share it.
Yes.
Right, Greg?
That is right. Sorry, my computer stalled. I mean, wait, this is a totally
This is an organic conversation.
Play
You're looking at
reading.
your
Yes.
computer?
Line.
This
Come on.
I should know this one by heart, but yes, Mario, you are correct. The electric grid is evolving to meet your cleaner energy needs as we all move with confidence towards an electric tomorrow. Whether you have one delivery van or, like Joe Brand, a whole fleet of shipping trucks, ComEd can
I've
help
seen it.
guide you to make the changes that make sense.
So, what should business owners like Joe do?
Well, Joe should go to ComEd.com/clean to learn more about the resources, fleet rebates, and infrastructure incentives available to help businesses go electric. If you own a business, don't wait. Well, you could wait till after the show. Start making your plan today to switch to electric vehicles. Good for business, good for the planet, good for all of us. Go to comed.com/clean.
Joe, that was comed.com/clean.
Yes.
Oh, I got it all right here. You guys just said it so eloquently that how could I forget it?
And organically.
Totally natural. So go there now. See how Going Electric connects us to a better way of doing business and a better future for generations to come, like Connor Bedard and all his legions of young hockey players.
Yes. Joe, you also do play-by-play for the Kane County Cougars in baseball, minor league baseball.
Yep.
How is that? I imagine it's completely different than the process of being involved in the Blackhawks broadcast. So how'd you get into that? How does that compare? And how are your summers doing that and doing baseball and diversifying yourself?
It's been great. I mean, I won't lie. Baseball is my first love. That's what I got into this industry for. But hockey is a very close second. And the transitioning was out of college. I got a gig in minor league baseball. The following year, I got a gig with the Cougars. And play-by-play is still my end goal. So that's what Kane County allows me to do. Going into my 10th year this summer, couldn't be more thrilled. It's a fantastic environment. I love the people I work for. And it's just a fun place to be around, especially during the summer. But my journey at WGN started as an intern, then as a producer, then as a reporter, part-time anchor, and then just things moved around to where there was an opening to get this gig, and I was lucky enough to grab it. And not only that, I love everyone that I work with because they allow me to do so many different things, like me being here right now. Right. But WGN understands where I want to be. The Kane County Cougars understand where I want to be, and we just make it happen, and I couldn't do that without the flexibility and the trust and the confidence I have with my bosses. But yeah, totally, two different entities. But again, I don't want to be a one-trick pony. I want to be able to do as much as I can. So calling baseball games is fantastic. We actually transitioned from a radio broadcast to a TV broadcast a couple of years ago when we moved to the American Association. So it's a television broadcast on the internet.
Sure.
But once we did that, some teams are kind of doing a simulcast, and I'm like, we're not doing a simulcast. We're doing TV. We're either doing TV or we're doing radio. They're both very important, but they are two totally different broadcasts. And I didn't have much TV experience, so I wanted to do more of that. So there's more of letting the game breathe. Yeah. There's more of finding out more about the players and trying to use that information and use it at the right time. This gig is different because I'm preparing for each game in a different way, and I'm trying to assist John and Troy. And but more importantly, I'm trying to benefit the listener as best I can. But doing Kane County Cougars games also allows me to just grow and learn and try things out. We just did this thing last year. We call it the bottom of the sixth. We treat the bottom of the sixth inning just like a podcast. Unless there's a home run or a diving play, we just talk. And as play-by-play announcers, my partner over there, Connor Klingon, does a great job as well. It's so challenging for us to watch the game and not say exactly what's going on at every time. So we kind of force ourselves to not do that. Yeah. So we pick a few topics and we just go. And the podcast lasts as long as the inning. If it's a 3-minute inning, we're done. If it's a 30-minute inning, we go that long. Wow. But it's something different. It's something challenging. And it's fun, and the Cougars allow me to do that because I could have a boss that would be like, no, you're calling the game. What do you knock it off with this crap? But I never get that, and I'm very fortunate too. And honestly, that's kind of the way the industry's going. I mean, look at you guys here. Who would envision this 10 years ago? Right. Not many people. Yeah. But it's just a way to try to stay active and fluid and up to date and go about it different ways. And you never know who you're going to entertain or really connect with by trying different things like that. So that's why I just try to keep an open mind with all of it.
Yeah, that's one thing I've learned is you never know who's either reading or listening. That can open a door for you or help you out along the road.
Or just recognize you randomly in public.
That's true, too. That's still. Do you get a lot of that, Joe? You're a radio guy, so I think a lot of people...
Yeah, not too much.
Do they hear you order something at the deli and go, hey, you're Joe Brand?
I will say that happened one time.
Oh, really?
I was at a local hole-in-the-wall bar back on the south side, and it was just me, a couple friends, and one random person, and the guy's like, man, you sound familiar. Do I know you? And I'm like... Listen, this is the only time I've ever said this, but yeah, I'm on the radio. I cover Hawks games. He's like, I'm a truck driver. You're Joe. I listen to you all the time. I'm like, that's pretty cool. He's like, and Blackhawks Live. I'm like, normally I'm the one telling people about my show. I'm like, thank you so much for listening, man. So that was pretty cool. And you're right, Greg. It's just like, hey, you never know who's listening, and that's a cool way to connect. So yeah, it doesn't happen that often. I ran into Mark Carmen at Great American Bagel right before this, nice. That was pretty amazing.
I'm sorry.
But, no, we had a great time. We caught up.
Did he buy you your bagel at least?
We did it the opposite way. He let me pay for him, actually.
That sounds
That's
like
so nice of him.
That story checks. Let's like
love you, Mark.
The whole he doesn't listen to our show. Like the whole like being recognized thing. Like it's one thing like some people see you at the United Center and you're like, okay, this is our environment.
True.
But like every once in a while, you know, like I told the story. I went to the Springsteen concert at Wrigley Field, and when I was walking in, someone shouted out my name and recognized me, which was weird. But then that whole show, I sat like 5 seats down from Duncan Keith and his son. And nobody bothered him the entire show, which I thought was really cool. But then, of course, I was like, well, one person recognized me, and not a single person recognized Duncan Keith. So I'm now more popular in Chicago than Duncan Keith.
Well, yeah,
go me.
That makes sense.
I win 1-0.
Yeah.
I recently read Mark Lazarus's book of If These Walls Could Talk, about the Hawks dynasty, and he was talking about the transitioning of nobody knowing who the Hawks were to they're like the Beatles. Yeah. And it's pretty crazy to see that type of transition. I do appreciate the fans who see an athlete or a famous person and just say, hey, how's it going? Mm-hmm. And leave it at that. Because I do think those guys just want to go on about their lives. They want to be able to go out in public and not be bombarded. Yeah. And a lot of times I think fans do that so they can have their story, you know, like, hey, let's take a picture, and it can be a harmless thing, right? But then to talk about it and then just kind of keep them for a little bit to make it their story. So I don't know. I appreciate, man, what's in this tea, man?
Bacon.
Yeah, right?
Some leftover bacon.
So I appreciate when fans understand that, and my goodness, I hope I am not coming across that like, I am holding myself to that kind of thing. But I remember seeing...
Don't bother Joe in public.
Yeah, no, not at all.
He's going to brush you off.
If you have any idea who I am, please say hello and tell me all about your life stories. But no, one time I saw, I think it was Patrick Sharp, like 10 years ago. And hey, Sharpie. Hey, how's it going? Having a good day? Yeah. And then like he crossed the street and then everyone bombarded him. Right. And you know, it's a different way to look at it. But by all means, if you see someone you feel the need to say hello to, go ahead and do it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's a difference between, like you said, like doing that and just being like, hi, you know, as a normal person.
Yeah.
And going up and being like, can I get your autograph? Like, yeah, can I take a picture? Like, it's completely different. But yeah, I like when the times that I've seen like someone where I'm like, that's somebody like out in public. I'm just like, for me, I'm just like, hey, I have a story to say. I saw so and so at Chipotle, like whatever. You know, it's fun to just kind of like have that. But yeah, I will say from doing this, like I've had a few people, like I play on a men's league, you know, recreation team. 3 of the guys on the team are like, you're on the CHGO thing. I'm just like, yeah, don't tell anyone how bad I am. Like, it's just like, but it's still always something that's just like, it's weird. Like not that it's weird that people like will recognize us or say anything, but it's just weird that it's just like, well, why do you know me? Like what, you know, but it is interesting. And I'm sure it's a completely different thing when you're like Connor Bedard walking to the grocery store or something. Like,
did you guys watch that one-on-one with him and Wembanyama?
I did.
Yeah, it was pretty cool.
I really enjoyed how they both seem to be handling all that fame the same amount of effectively well.
Yeah.
But it is cool to see the differences. Like Bedard's very stoic. Mm-hmm. He's so mature and he's so professional. And Wembanyama is as well, but he is also a little bit more outgoing. Yeah. You know, he's at the barbecue shop with his cowboy hat and taking pictures, and he's just like...
He stands out in a crowd a little
more.
That's
a very good point.
Say, you can pick him out of a crowd way more than Connor.
But it's just, and again, it's not like Bedard is not embracing all the fandom, because I think he's doing a great job of handling it all, but Wembanyama's like embracing it a little bit of a different way and just kind of getting into it. But he's like, I'd like to do that because it's good recognition for my sport, and it's a good way to promote and share the sport. And I also think that there's just such a difference with this generation. Everyone, likes to compare generations, which one's better and which one's not. And this younger generation, Gen Z or whatever, they just do a good job of embracing success and not so much obsessing over it, but just holding it to a very high standard. And it comes across as so natural, not as cocky.
Yeah.
Just a way that they understand that success should be celebrated, but in the right way.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that probably is because of people growing up with the internet and the access.
Yeah,
I think we've seen so many things of celebrities or athletes just having so much recognition and so much accessibility that like when they have success, there's a lot that people will go to try and knock them down from it. So It's just like, I think people getting to that point and trying to stay like grounded, like you're saying, like, I think it's just kind of like learned of like, well, people are going to try and, take advantage of that. And, if you stay humble in yourself and you stay appreciative of, who helps get you there and your journey and everything, I think people of that generation are a little bit more conscious of that. And like, you see it with Bedard, like we say it's just like, oh, he's just so guarded. It's just like, well, he's also being smart about it.
I think that's the main thing. He's just being strategic. And
Yeah.
he's a very smart dude because he's witty. He's not giving us the same cliche answers for everything, and he's listening to each question individually and spitting out a genuine, natural answer. And I do think that that's a better reflection of that generation than the generalized stereotype that other people have, just because it's not their generation that they're used to.
Alrighty, well, I think we've covered everything we possibly could cover.
That
Minor
and
league
more.
Baseball, being celebrities, all that fun stuff.
Where are the celebrities, by the way?
I don't know. Only in my head. That's gonna wrap up. Joe, thank you so much for stopping in, being generous with your time.
Hey, thanks for having me again.
Always a pleasure. We will see you back at Fifth Third bright and early on Monday, I'm sure.
Wow. Coming up already. Huh?
Yeah. So enjoy the rest of your time off and the All-Star festivities this weekend. Mario and I will be back tomorrow at 3:00 again. We'll have Pete and/or DJ from the What Chaos show on. We'll take a trip around the NHL. It seems like we'll have to talk about the Blue Jackets yet again. Every time,
Probably.
the day
Didn't
before.
you have a different name for them last year?
Yeah, well, yeah.
We did.
There may be.
We're pausing that name.
We're pausing it. There
For
may or may not
temporary.
be a sponsor from the Columbus area. So
Okay.
I'm gonna.
Sorry, I don't mean to get you guys in more trouble.
Until they sign that check, I'm gonna call them by their proper name. It's not too hard to find out what I was calling them. So yeah, tomorrow 3:00. What Chaos? We'll be back. Thanks again, Joe Brand. Check him out over at WGN. Pre-po intermission. All the stuff. He's the voice that makes it happen over there. And we will see you guys back here tomorrow at 3:00. Once again, the CHGO Blackhawks Podcast is powered by ComEd. It's getting easier for you to switch your business to switch to electric vehicles. Learn more at comed.com/cleaning. Do us a favor, hit that like button on your way out, please. And we'll see you tomorrow at 3.
We all silly like the mayor.